I am Crissy Anderson, 29 years old, a gym coach from Chicago, Illinois. On a cold Thursday evening, I walked into our apartment after a long day of training sessions, only to find my roommate, Derek, rummaging through my locked duffel bag. My paycheck, 2 weeks of sweat and effort, was stuffed halfway into his back pocket. He froze when he saw me, guilt scrawled all over his face, but the damage had already been done. The fluorescent lights of our cramped kitchen buzzed overhead as my world tilted sideways. My sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor as I stepped closer, my heart pounding like a drumline in my chest. I could still smell the faint tang of sweat and chalk clinging to my clothes from the gym, mixing with the scent of cheap takeout Derek had left half-eaten on the counter. My voice cracked when I asked, "What are you doing?" But he didn't answer. His silence told me everything. Before I share how this betrayal unfolded, let me know where you are watching from and subscribe if you value standing up for yourself. That night etched itself into my memory as the exact moment the trust I had built with Derek shattered. The room seemed to shrink, the golden hue of our table lamp casting long, sharp shadows across his face. I thought back to when I first let him move in, convinced that splitting rent with someone I'd known since college would be safe. We had shared dorm rooms, late-night pizza deliveries, even exam stress together. He wasn't just a roommate. He was supposed to be family. And yet here he was, stealing the money I needed to pay bills and keep myself afloat. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, I'd learned early that money wasn't something you could take for granted. My mom raised me and my younger brother alone, working double shifts at a diner just to cover rent. I picked up odd jobs as soon as I was old enough. Babysitting, mowing lawns, working cash registers, anything to pitch in. By the time I graduated, I'd already developed an unshakable work ethic. Coaching wasn't just my job, it was my identity. It meant being disciplined, honest, and strong, not just physically but mentally. Derek had always seemed different. He came from a family with money, though he pretended otherwise when it suited him. At first, I thought our differences balanced us out. Where I was focused, he was carefree. Where I was serious, he was playful. But living with him revealed cracks. Bills were mysteriously late, groceries disappeared faster than I could buy them, and somehow his promises to Venmo me later always got lost in the shuffle. Still, I had never expected him to cross the one line that couldn't be uncrossed: stealing. "Put it back," I said that night, my voice low, shaking with a fury I barely recognized. My fists curled at my sides. The same fists I used to show students proper form when teaching them how to box for fitness. Derek stammered something about borrowing and bad timing, but the words rang hollow. His eyes darted everywhere but mine. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stood there watching him like a coach waiting for a student to admit defeat. Inside, though, I was crumbling. This wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal. It was about opening my home to someone I thought I could trust, only to have that trust ripped away in one careless, selfish act. When I finally grabbed the envelope of cash from his pocket, my hands trembled, not from weakness but from rage. "If you needed money, you could have asked," I told him, my voice steadier now. "But you didn't, you lied. You stole." Derek tried to laugh it off, but his nervous chuckle echoed like nails on glass in the suffocating silence of our apartment. His smirk faded when he saw I wasn't playing along. I wasn't the kind of woman to look away when someone tried to rob me. Not anymore. Because the truth was, this wasn't the first time someone had taken from me. When I was 17, a neighbor I trusted borrowed my mom's old car, promising to bring it back the next day. He never returned it. We found it weeks later, stripped for parts in a junkyard on the west side. That memory had lived in me like a scar, a reminder of how quickly trust could turn into regret. I thought I'd learned my lesson back then, but apparently, I hadn't learned it well enough. Now, standing in my kitchen with Derek's betrayal staring me in the face, I knew this was the moment I had to change. The betrayal wasn't just Derek's. It was mine, too, for ignoring the red flags, for believing his excuses, for convincing myself he wouldn't go too far. I had given him the benefit of the doubt over and over, and this was the price I paid. As I slipped the envelope back into my duffel bag, my chest heaved with a mix of sorrow and determination. Derek muttered something about paying me back, about fixing things, but his words fell flat, useless. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't trust in my own home. That night, as I sat awake in my bedroom with the city lights glowing through the blinds, I replayed every sign I had missed. The mysteriously missing $20 bills from my wallet, the way he avoided eye contact when rent came up, the constant excuses. I realized betrayal rarely happens all at once. It's a slow erosion, a crack that spreads until the whole wall crumbles. But this was where I drew the line. Derek might have thought he could get away with stealing from me, but he was about to learn a painful lesson, that betrayal carries a price, and I was done letting others write the bill for me. The morning after catching Derek with my money, the air in the apartment felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on every corner. I woke up earlier than usual, the kind of restless sleep where you keep jerking awake, replaying the same scene over and over until it becomes unbearable. The city outside was alive as always, car horns blaring, trains screeching in the distance. But inside, everything was still. Too still. When I stepped into the kitchen, Derek was sitting at the table, staring into a half-empty cup of coffee. His unkempt hair stuck out in every direction, and his hoodie looked like he had slept in it. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the feel of my paycheck envelope slipping out of his pocket the night before, and the pity evaporated. "You gonna say something?" I asked, reaching for a protein shake from the fridge. My voice was colder than I intended, but I didn't care. Derek looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Crissy, I was desperate, okay? Rent's killing me, my hours got cut at work, and I didn't know what else to do." I shook my head, twisting the cap off the bottle. "You could have asked. You didn't have to steal." He flinched at the word steal, like it burned him. "I was gonna pay you back." "You always say that," I snapped. "Groceries, utilities, your share of rent. You always say you'll pay me back. But you don't. You've been bleeding me dry for months, Derek, and I was too stupid to see it." His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. He looked down at his coffee instead, tracing the rim with his finger. I wanted to storm out, but instead, I sat across from him, studying his face. I realized I didn't even recognize him anymore. This wasn't the same guy I went to college with, the one who helped me cram for exams and carried my boxes up 4 flights of stairs when I moved into the dorms. Somewhere along the way, he had changed, or maybe he had always been this way, and I just refused to see it. "You've been lying to me for months," I said finally. "That's what hurts the most. You could have trusted me, Derek. Instead, you made me your mark." He slammed his hands on the table suddenly, startling me. "I'm not some criminal," his voice cracked. "I just needed help." "And you thought stealing from the person keeping a roof over your head was the way to get it?" I fired back. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. That day, I went to work at the gym like nothing had happened, but the weight of the betrayal followed me everywhere. My clients asked me why I seemed distracted. I blamed it on lack of sleep. But the truth was gnawing at me. Derek was still living under my roof, and every time I pictured him sneaking into my room or digging through my things, my stomach knotted with anger. After my last class, I stayed behind, punching the heavy bag until my hands ached. Each strike felt like an outlet for the rage bubbling inside me. Sweat dripped down my back, my breath coming in sharp bursts. But no matter how hard I hit, I couldn't shake the image of Derek's guilty face. On the train ride home, I thought about kicking him out right then and there. But another part of me hesitated. We'd shared years of friendship. Did that mean nothing? Was there still a piece of the old Derek worth saving? When I got back, the apartment smelled faintly of burnt toast. Derek was in the living room, glued to the TV, pretending like everything was normal. I dropped my bag by the door and crossed my arms. "We need to set some ground rules," I said. He muted the TV reluctantly. "Like what?" "Like you don't touch my stuff, ever. No excuses. And from now on, you pay me your share of the bills on time. No more promises. Cash in hand or you're out." Derek's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Fine," I narrowed my eyes. "I mean it. I'm done being taken advantage of." He muttered something under his breath, but I didn't ask him to repeat it. I was too tired. That night, lying in bed, I thought back to when we first became friends. Derek had always been the life of the party, the guy who cracked jokes during study sessions, who convinced me to take breaks when I was drowning in assignments. He wasn't perfect, but he had been there when I needed him. Now it felt like I was living with a stranger. I remembered one winter break when I couldn't afford to fly home. Derek had stayed with me on campus, even though his family lived just 2 hours away. We watched movies, cooked ramen, and he surprised me with a thrift store hoodie because he knew I hated the cold. That Derek, the one who cared about me, felt like a ghost now. Maybe that's why I didn't throw him out immediately. A part of me still clung to the memory of who he used to be, even though the evidence in front of me told a different story. But as the days passed, I noticed more cracks in the foundation of our friendship. His excuses piled up. His late-night outings grew suspicious. Little things disappeared. A pair of earrings, a bottle of cologne I had bought for myself after a big win with one of my clients. I confronted him once, but he swore he didn't take them. Still, the seed of doubt was already there, and it grew with every lie. Trust, once broken, doesn't repair itself easily. And in our small apartment, that broken trust spread like mold, seeping into every corner until I couldn't breathe without wondering what else Derek had taken from me. One night, I found myself sitting on the fire escape, the cold Chicago air biting at my skin. I looked out at the maze of lights and thought about my mom, about how she raised me to never let anyone walk over me. She had sacrificed too much for me to let someone like Derek ruin everything I had built. I made myself a promise right then. If Derek crossed me again, I wouldn't just confront him. I would make sure he learned exactly what it meant to betray me. And deep down, I had a feeling that moment was coming sooner than I wanted. The weeks that followed our uneasy truce were like walking on a floor full of cracks, where one wrong step could send everything crashing down. Derek tried to act like things were normal, washing dishes occasionally, taking out the trash once in a while. But the silence between us was deafening. Every time I looked at him, all I saw was the moment he pulled my paycheck out of his pocket. His guilt written across his face, at the gym. I buried myself in training sessions, pushing clients harder, staying later, and pretending like everything was fine. But it wasn't. At night, when I came home to our apartment, I felt like I was entering enemy territory. My key rattled in the lock, and I'd brace myself, wondering what I'd find on the other side. The first real sign that things weren't improving came one Thursday night. I had left $50 on the counter, tip money from a client who insisted on rewarding me in cash. And when I came home, it was gone. I asked Derek about it casually, watching his reaction. $50? He shrugged. You probably misplaced it. I don't misplace money, I said flatly. He raised an eyebrow. You accusing me again? I didn't answer. The truth was written all over his face. He leaned back on the couch, pretending to be offended, but his eyes darted toward my room like a guilty child. That night, I shoved a chair under my doorknob before going to sleep. I hated that I had to treat my own home like a war zone. But something deep in my gut told me Derek wasn't done crossing the line. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of him laughing on the phone. His voice carried through the thin walls. Yeah, man, I got it covered. She doesn't suspect a thing. The words sent a chill through me. I pressed my ear to the wall, straining to hear more. Nah, she's too busy working. I'll get the rest soon, don't worry. The rest of what? My fists clenched at my sides. When I stepped into the kitchen, Derek quickly hung up. He gave me a sheepish grin, the kind a kid gives when caught sneaking cookies before dinner. Who were you talking to? I asked, keeping my voice even. Just a buddy, he said. Which buddy? Does it matter? Yes, Derek, it matters. He rolled his eyes. You don't have to interrogate me every time I breathe, Crissy. I stared at him, trying to read the truth in his expression. But he was a master at slipping masks on and off. He always had been. Later that week, the missing items started to add up. A watch I'd won at a fitness expo vanished from my dresser. A set of resistance bands I'd ordered for my clients disappeared from the storage closet. Even my Bluetooth earbuds were gone. When I confronted Derek again, he raised his hands defensively. You think I need your cheap stuff? He scoffed. Yes, I shot back. Because you already took the one thing that wasn't cheap, my trust. He didn't answer, just stormed out, slamming the door behind him. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling the same questions. What was he taking these things for? Was he selling them? Was he in some kind of trouble? The answer came sooner than I expected. I had left work early one Friday to catch up on paperwork at home. As I approached the building, I spotted Derek outside near the alley, handing something small to a guy in a hoodie. The man slipped Derek a wad of cash before disappearing into the shadows. My stomach dropped. Derek didn't see me at first. He tucked the cash into his pocket and started walking toward the door. That's when I stepped into his path. What the hell was that? I demanded. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed. What are you doing here? I live here, I snapped. Answer the question. It's nothing, he muttered. Don't lie to me again, Derek. He sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. Fine, I owed someone money, okay? I sold a couple things to pay him back. No big deal. No big deal. My voice rose, echoing off the brick walls. You're selling my things to pay off your debts? That's theft, Derek. That's betrayal. He flinched at the word again, but his shoulders stiffened. I had no choice. There's always a choice, I said, my voice trembling with anger. And you keep choosing the wrong one. We stood there in the alley, the air thick with tension, until Derek finally brushed past me and went inside. I didn't follow. Instead, I walked the long block around our building, trying to calm the storm inside me. By the time I returned, Derek was in his room with the door shut. I could hear faint music playing, like he was trying to drown out the world. That night, I made a decision. If he betrayed me one more time, I wasn't just going to kick him out. I was going to make sure he regretted ever thinking he could take advantage of me. The next day, I bought a small safe and installed it in my closet. I kept my paychecks, jewelry, and anything else valuable inside. Derek raised an eyebrow when he noticed me carrying the box in. Paranoid much? He said with a smirk. Prepared, I corrected him. He didn't respond, but the smirk faded from his face. Still, no amount of locks or safes could stop the growing distance between us. We used to laugh together over late-night pizza runs. Now we barely spoke. Every word was laced with suspicion. Every glance a silent accusation. But beneath my anger, there was something else. A deep sadness. This wasn't just about stolen money or missing things. This was about losing someone I once trusted more than anyone. Derek wasn't just my roommate. He had been my friend. And now, every day that passed, it felt like I was watching him disappear into someone I didn't know. A shadow of who he used to be. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, how many chances do you give someone before you realize they don't deserve any more? I didn't have the answer then, but I knew I was close to finding out. Because the shadows of doubt weren't just in Derek's actions anymore. They were in me too. Every time I doubted my own instincts, every time I hesitated to act, I let him take a little more from me. And if I didn't stop it soon, there'd be nothing left to protect. I woke up the following Monday with a heaviness in my chest that no workout or protein shake could fix. The cracks in my trust had spread so wide that Derek and I were practically strangers living under the same roof. Every sound he made, the creak of his door opening, the shuffle of his sneakers on the floor, felt like a reminder that my home wasn't safe anymore. I dressed quickly in my gym uniform, threw my duffel bag over my shoulder, and grabbed my coffee on the way out. But when I reached for my car keys on the counter, they weren't there. My stomach tightened. I checked the hook by the door, my bag, even the sink. Nothing. Derek! I shouted down the hallway. The door cracked open, and there he was, rubbing his eyes like he'd just rolled out of bed. What? Where are my keys? He shrugged. How should I know? I glared at him. Because you're the only one here besides me. He crossed his arms, his jaw tight. Maybe you misplaced them. No, I snapped. Not again. Where are they? For a split second, his eyes flickered toward his dresser. It was enough. I stormed into his room, ignoring his protests, and yanked open the top drawer. There they were, my keys, sitting on top of a crumpled wad of cash. I turned back to him, shaking with rage. Do you have any idea how insane this is? You're stealing from me in my own home. Again. He held up his hands. Relax, I was going to give them back. Why did you take them in the first place? His lips parted, but no excuse came. He just stood there, caught. That was it. The breaking point. You need to leave, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Pack your stuff and get out. His expression hardened. You can't just throw me out, Crissy. My name's on the lease too, I froze. He was right. We had signed it together 6 months ago when I thought living with him would be fun, when I thought he was someone I could trust. Fine, I said. Then stay out of my way. But if you touch my stuff again, I swear I'll call the cops. His face twitched, but he didn't argue. Instead, he slammed his door shut so hard the picture frames in the hallway rattled. I drove to work with my knuckles white around the steering wheel. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. I botched a client's deadlift form, mixed up schedules, and even forgot my water bottle in the squat rack room. My coworkers asked if I was okay, and I plastered on a fake smile. But inside, I was unraveling. By the time I got home, the apartment felt even more suffocating. Derek was sprawled on the couch, watching TV, acting like nothing had happened. Empty soda cans littered the coffee table, and the smell of stale chips filled the air. Did you even look for a job today? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't look away from the screen. Don't start. No, really, Derek, what's your plan here? To sit around all day living off me? Finally, he muted the TV and turned his head. His eyes were sharp, almost mocking. Maybe that's the price you pay for being so perfect. You've got it all figured out, don't you? The great Crissy Anderson. The gym coach who thinks she's better than everyone. His words hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. I don't think I'm better. I just think I deserve respect. Something you clearly don't understand. He smirked. Respect? You think the world runs on respect? No, it runs on power and money. And right now, you're the one with both. So congratulations. I stared at him, stunned. That's what this is about? You resent me for working hard? He didn't answer. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of my keys sitting in his drawer, proof of what he'd done. One more move like that, and this goes straight to the landlord. Or the police. Your choice. He glared but said nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to every sound he made. The fridge door opening, the bathroom sink running, his footsteps pacing. My body was tense, ready to jump up if he tried something again. By morning, I felt like a zombie. My clients at the gym noticed my energy was off, but I brushed it aside. When I came home that evening, I found Derek gone. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe he'd finally taken the hint. But when I entered my room, I froze. My safe was gone. I stumbled forward, my heart slamming against my ribs. The corner of the closet where the safe had been was empty, dust marking the outline where it once sat. No, I whispered. No. I ran into the living room. Derek's shoes were missing. His backpack, too. The realization hit me like a weight crashing down. He had taken everything. I grabbed my phone and dialed him, but it went straight to voicemail. Fury surged through me, but beneath it was a sharp, stabbing pain. He hadn't just stolen money or valuables. He had stolen my sense of security, my faith in him, and my patience. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war. The next day, I filed a police report. The officer nodded sympathetically, jotting down notes, but his tone was flat. If he's on the lease, it complicates things. It becomes more of a civil issue. So, what am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice cracking. Change the locks if you can. Collect proof. Build your case. Proof. I already had some. The photo of my keys in his drawer. My bank app showing missing funds. And now, the missing safe. When I got home, the apartment felt hollow, as if Derek had sucked all the air out of it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the bare counter, the empty hallway, the echo of silence pressing in. For the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. And yet, deep down, something else stirred. Something stronger than fear or sadness. Determination. Derek thought he had won. But he didn't know me as well as he thought. I wasn't just a coach who taught others to be strong. I was strong. Strong enough to fight back. Strong enough to make him regret underestimating me. As I clenched my fists, I whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. This is the breaking point, and from here on, I take control." The morning after filing the police report, I woke up to a hollow apartment. The quiet was no longer comforting but oppressive. Every creak of the floorboards reminding me that Derek had stolen more than my safe. He had stolen my peace of mind. I sat on the edge of my bed, my phone clutched in my hands, scrolling through old messages Derek and I had exchanged when we first decided to move in together. Back then, he'd been charming, dependable, even supportive. He was the friend who swore he'd split rent fairly, keep his space clean, and respect boundaries. What a joke. Now, all I saw were lies typed in blue and gray bubbles. By noon, I was pacing the kitchen, running on cold coffee and anger. Enough was enough. If the cops couldn't help me, I'd help myself. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Step 1, list everything missing. My safe. My grandmother's necklace. For $200 cash. A pair of limited edition sneakers I had saved for months to buy. Step 2, collect evidence. I printed the photo of my keys in his drawer. I saved screenshots of my bank withdrawals. Step 3, find him. That last one felt impossible. Derek had no steady job, no real family ties, and bounced between friends like a nomad. But I knew his habits. He was addicted to late-night poker games, obsessed with showing off sneakers he couldn't afford, and always chasing people who would enable his arrogance. So I started with the obvious. That night, I drove to his favorite dive bar on the south side. The place smelled like stale beer and cheap perfume. Music thumped from an old jukebox, and men hunched over pool tables, their laughter loud and careless. I scanned the room, my pulse hammering. No, Derek, I ordered a club soda, pretending to scroll through my phone while my eyes darted across every face. A bartender leaned on the counter, raising an eyebrow. You look like you're searching for someone. Maybe, I said cautiously. Tall guy, buzz cut. Wears sneakers he can't afford. The bartender chuckled. That's half the guys in here. My lips tightened. He wasn't wrong. I left empty-handed, frustration gnawing at me. 2 days later, I checked another spot. A rundown sneaker shop Derek practically worshipped. I circled the aisles, pretending to browse, until I spotted something that made my stomach flip. On the display shelf sat my limited edition sneakers. The very ones Derek had stolen. I picked one up, my hands trembling. These are new arrivals? I asked the clerk. Consignment, he replied. Guy dropped them off yesterday. Said he needed quick cash. My voice caught. What guy? The clerk shrugged. Didn't get his name. Tall, buzz-cut, tattoo on his wrist. Derek, no doubt. I wanted to scream, but instead, I forced myself to think. This was proof. If he was pawning off my belongings, there would be a trail. Back home, I dug deeper. I created a folder on my laptop labeled Derek Evidence and filled it with every scrap I had. Screenshots, receipts, and now, a note about the sneaker shop. But the turning point didn't come until the next night. I was at the gym, closing up after a late shift, when one of my clients, Marco, noticed how drained I looked. He was a retired cop, sharp-eyed and kind, the type who could sense when something was wrong. You've been off all week, coach, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Something going on? Normally I'd brush it off, but exhaustion loosened my guard. I told him everything. Derek's betrayal, the missing safe, the useless police report. Marco listened quietly, then leaned closer. You're not powerless, Crissy. You've got evidence. Build your case. Small claims court, maybe even criminal if you can prove enough. Don't let him think he's untouchable. His words hit me like a spark in the dark. He was right. I wasn't helpless. I just needed strategy. That night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. mapping everything out. My plan wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about taking back control. The first step, secure my space. I called a locksmith the next morning and changed every lock in the apartment. Watching the old keys drop uselessly into my trash felt like a symbolic victory. The second step, track Derek. If he thought he could disappear into Chicago's chaos, he underestimated me. I reached out to mutual acquaintances, casual friends, even a guy from our old basketball group. Some ignored me. Others were more helpful. Yeah, I saw him last night, one said. He was bragging about a big poker game. Said he finally had cash again. Poker, of course. The third step, prepare my case. I contacted my landlord and explained the situation, forwarding the photos and bank records. He wasn't thrilled about being dragged into roommate drama. But when I showed him proof Derek had stolen items, he agreed to put me in touch with the building's lawyer. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground beneath me steady again. But empowerment has a way of drawing out your enemies. 3 nights later, I returned home to find Derek waiting outside the building. He leaned against the wall, hood up, cigarette dangling from his lips. When our eyes met, he smirked. "Miss me?" I froze, my keys clutched tight in my fist. "What are you doing here?" He flicked the cigarette onto the ground, crushing it with his sneaker. "Relax, I just came for my stuff." "You mean my stuff?" I shot back. His smirk vanished. "Don't play games, Crissy. You think changing the locks will stop me? You think going to the cops scares me?" My chest tightened, but I stood tall. "It should. I've got proof. And if you step 1 foot inside, I'll make sure they drag you out in cuffs." His eyes darkened. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." For a long moment, we stared at each other, the tension thick. Finally, he laughed, low and bitter. "You've changed. You used to be fun. Now you're just cold." "Cold is what happens when you burn every bridge," I said evenly. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath, then turned and walked away. I didn't move until he disappeared around the corner. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was solid. This was no longer about stolen sneakers or a missing safe. This was about reclaiming my dignity. Derek had underestimated me once. He wouldn't make that mistake again. As I locked the door behind me, I whispered to myself, the turning point isn't about what he took. It's about what I'm about to take back. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed it. The morning after Derek showed up outside my building, I woke with a pounding in my chest. His smirk, his words, his arrogance, they looped in my head like a broken record. But instead of fear, I felt something sharper. Determination. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my notebook. Page after page was filled with scribbles of evidence, dates, and angry reminders of what Derek had done. I stared at the list, then underlined one sentence in bold. Take my power back. I decided that day I wouldn't just defend myself. I would fight back with everything I had. The first step was building a stronger case. I called the sneaker shop where Derek had pawned my shoes. "This is Crissy Anderson," I said, steadying my voice. "The sneakers sold yesterday? They were stolen from me." The clerk hesitated. "Do you have proof?" "Yes. Receipts, photos, everything." "I'll email them now." He sighed. "All right, if the police need records, we'll cooperate. But you'll have to get them involved officially." That was good enough for me. One more brick in my wall of evidence. The second step was reclaiming my confidence. Derek had always relied on intimidation, leaning on my kindness and fear. But I wasn't the same naive roommate anymore. I was stronger now, in body and mind. That afternoon at the gym, I trained harder than I had in months. Sweat poured down my back as I pushed through deadlifts, squats, and pull-ups. Each rep felt like striking back, each bead of sweat a reminder of how much I could endure. Marco, my retired cop client, spotted me. "You're killing yourself in here," he said, half admiring, half concerned. "I'm preparing," I answered simply. "For what?" "For war." His eyebrows rose, but he didn't laugh. He just nodded. "Then make sure you fight smart, not just hard." His words stayed with me. Fighting smart meant allies. That evening, I reached out to an old friend, Lisa. She and I had been close in college before life pulled us apart. She worked in property management now and knew the ins and outs of tenant laws. When I told her about Derek, her voice hardened. "He sounds like a leech. Send me your documents. I'll review everything and help you figure out your legal angles." Relief washed over me. Having Lisa on my side was like gaining a shield. Over the next week, I transformed my apartment into a war room. My dining table was covered with folders, receipts, and photos. Sticky notes lined the walls like a detective's caseboard. I even tracked Derek's movements. Mutual friends mentioned his poker games. A cousin of his slipped up on social media, tagging him at a downtown bar, Piece by piece, I built a map of his habits. But the real breakthrough came unexpectedly. One night, I was reviewing old security footage from our building. My landlord had given me access after I explained the situation. As I scrubbed through the footage, I spotted Derek entering my apartment the night my safe disappeared. He used his key, my key. Then, an hour later, he left, carrying a duffel bag bulging at the sides. I froze the frame, zoomed in, and snapped a screenshot. My heart pounded with vindication. This was it. Proof undeniable. I printed the image and taped it to my wall. "Checkmate," I whispered. Still, Derek wasn't giving up. Twice more that week, he texted me vague threats. "You'll regret crossing me. Open the door next time, or you'll be sorry." I blocked his number but saved the screenshots. More evidence, more fuel. Yet even as I grew stronger, doubt gnawed at me. Could I really take this to court? What if Derek twisted the story and made me look crazy? What if no one believed me? Those fears haunted me until Friday night, when Marco pulled me aside after his session. "You're ready to fight him, but you look like you're still fighting yourself." I exhaled shakily. "What if I lose?" He studied me for a moment. "Then you'll know you fought. But from what I see, you've already won half the battle. You're not his victim anymore." His words hit deep. That weekend, I tested my courage. I returned to the poker bar Derek loved. The stench of smoke and desperation clung to the air. My stomach twisted. But I walked in tall, and there he was. Derek, at a corner table, laughing too loudly. A pile of chips stacked in front of him. My sneakers, the ones he had pawned, were on his feet. Anger surged, but I stayed calm. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo, careful not to draw attention. Another nail in his coffin. As I turned to leave, Derek spotted me. His smirk spread wide. "Well, well. Look who's stalking me." I clenched my fists. "Just collecting what's mine." He laughed, tossing a chip in the air. "Face it, Crissy. You'll never beat me. You're soft. You always have been." I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Not anymore. The table went quiet. For a moment, even Derek looked uncertain. I walked out without another word, my heart hammering but my back straight. That night, I barely slept. Not because of fear, but because of clarity. Derek's arrogance would be his downfall. By Monday morning, I was ready. Lisa helped me file a formal complaint. Marco put me in touch with an attorney he trusted. I submitted the sneaker shop records, the bank statements, the security footage, the photos of Derek wearing my stolen shoes. Piece by piece, my fortress was built, but gathering strength wasn't only about legal weapons. It was about reclaiming who I was. I called my mom, who I hadn't spoken to in weeks out of embarrassment. I told her everything. Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want you to think I'd failed." "Crissy," she said softly. "Failing would have been letting him keep walking over you. But you're standing up. That's strength." I hung up feeling lighter, more anchored. The next time Derek's face flashed in my mind, it wasn't with fear. It was with resolve. He had taken my safe. My sneakers! My trust, but I had taken back my voice. My courage. My strength. And I wasn't finished yet. The city air bit at my cheeks as I stepped out of my apartment building that Monday morning, files tucked neatly in my backpack. For weeks, Derek had been circling like a predator, convinced I'd always cower, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't prey anymore. I was the one hunting, and every piece of evidence I collected tightened the noose around his smug grin. I walked into the law office Marco had recommended. My attorney, Ms. Patel, greeted me with a firm handshake. She was a petite woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a voice that carried calm authority. "Crissy, I reviewed the documents you emailed," she said, motioning for me to sit. "You have a strong case. The footage, the pawn shop receipt, the texts, they paint a very clear picture of theft and harassment." Hearing her say it out loud made my pulse race. "So we can actually take him down?" She nodded. "We'll file a restraining order first. That gives you immediate protection. Then we'll press criminal charges for the theft." The words criminal charges sent a thrill down my spine. Finally, accountability. I signed the paperwork with steady hands. For months, Derek had taken what he wanted and laughed in my face. But this time, the law was behind me. Afterward, I stopped at the gym. Training wasn't just about strength anymore. It was about clarity. As I pushed through burpees and kettlebell swings, my mind replayed Derek's sneer at the poker bar. He still thought I was bluffing. Good. Let him think that. By midweek, things started moving fast. A process server delivered notice of the restraining order to Derek at his job. My phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. Word is out, he flipped when he got the papers. I pictured him red-faced, sputtering excuses. Satisfaction warmed my chest. Still, I knew Derek wouldn't go quietly. That evening, I spotted him lurking across the street from my building. He leaned against a lamppost, pretending to scroll his phone, but his eyes kept darting to my window. My stomach twisted, but instead of fear, I felt steel. I lifted my own phone and snapped a photo. Flash off, evidence logged. Then I called Ms. Patel. He's outside, violating the order. Document everything, she instructed. We'll add it to the case. Clicking the phone shut, I let the curtains fall closed. Derek thought he could intimidate me, but every move he made only buried him deeper. Thursday brought another twist. Marco slid onto a bench beside me after training, sweat dripping from his brow. Heard something, he said quietly. Derek's bragging around town. Claims you don't have the guts to follow through. I smirked grimly. He'll find out soon enough. Marco's eyes hardened. Stay alert. Cornered men lash out. I promised I would. That night, my nerves rattled. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across the room. Derek's face haunted me, not with fear, but with anticipation. We were closing in on each other, the tension like a coiled spring. Friday morning, Ms. Patel called. Good news. The DA is reviewing the case. With the evidence we've submitted, it looks promising. But they'll want a witness for the pawnshop transaction. Can you track one down? My heart jumped. I'll try. I spent the afternoon canvassing the pawnshop neighborhood, asking around. Finally, I found an elderly man who remembered Derek lugging in my sneakers. Saw him bragging about the price too, he told me. Said he got one over on his roommate. I thanked him, recorded his statement on my phone, and nearly skipped back home. That night, my apartment felt different. Not like a cage, but like a base of operations. My dining table map was nearly complete. Every document, every screenshot, every witness statement. It was all coming together. Still, Derek wasn't done playing games. At 2 a.m, my buzzer rang. My body shot upright, adrenaline flooding my veins. I didn't answer, just crept to the window. There he was again, Derek swaying slightly, drunk or high, shouting slurred insults up at my window. You think you're better than me, Crissy? He bellowed. You're nothing without me. Nothing. My neighbor's lights flicked on, faces peering through blinds. Derek cursed, stumbled, and staggered off down the street. I pressed record the whole time. Another nail. By Saturday, I felt the tide shifting. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. Lisa met me at a cafe to go over the case file. She spread the papers across the table, nodding approvingly. You've built a fortress, she said. He can't wiggle out of this. The only thing left is timing. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness sharp and satisfying. Timing for what? For the moment he realizes the game's over. Later that day, Marco joined me at the gym again. He tossed me a pair of gloves. Sparring session? I blinked. With you? Why not? You've got fire in your gut. Let's see it. We circled each other on the mat. I threw jabs. He blocked easily. But as the rounds continued, I found my rhythm. Sweat stung my eyes. My muscles burned, but my strikes grew sharper. When Marco finally raised his hand, grinning, I felt exhilarated. You're ready, he said simply. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, wiping sweat from my brow. My reflection stared back, strong and unflinching. For the first time, I believed it fully. Derek was the one trapped now. Not me. Sunday morning dawned quiet and cold. I jogged by the lakefront, Chicago's skyline glowing against the sunrise. My mind buzzed with everything ahead. Court dates, testimonies, justice. I slowed to a stop, breathing deeply. The wind whipped across the water, crisp and bracing. This was no longer about revenge. It was about reclaiming every part of me Derek had tried to crush. and as the waves lapped against the shore, I whispered into the wind, "I'm ready." The week ahead would bring the confrontation I'd been building toward. The reckoning Derek never saw, coming. He thought he'd stolen from me and walked, free. But he was about to learn, every betrayal has a price, and I was done letting him write the rules. The week began with frost painting the edges of Chicago's sidewalks, each step crunching beneath my sneakers as I walked to the courthouse. Inside my bag sat the neatly bound file, witness statement, pawnshop receipt, video evidence, and screenshots. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like years of humiliation, betrayal, and stolen nights crystallized into one arsenal of truth. Ms. Patel met me at the courthouse steps. Her hair was pulled into a severe bun, her blazer immaculate. "This is it," she said. "We file today. By afternoon, Derek will officially face charges." A shiver rippled through me, not of fear but anticipation. Let's end this. Inside, the courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and burnt coffee. I watched Ms. Patel hand the file to the clerk, her movements precise, professional. When the papers were stamped, she turned back to me with a small nod. It's official. My knees weakened, but I stood tall. For months, Derek had been the shadow looming over me. Now, the system itself was bearing down on him. But Derek wasn't the kind of man to retreat gracefully. That night, I returned to my building and found my front door ajar. My chest tightened as I stepped inside, heart hammering in my ears. Nothing looked stolen this time, but my dresser drawers were yanked open, clothes scattered like confetti. A single sticky note sat on the kitchen counter. "You can't win." My breath shook, rage igniting like a match. He had violated my space again, daring me to crumble. Instead, I pulled out my phone, photographed the note, and called the police. Officer Ramirez arrived within 20 minutes. He was tall, weary-eyed, but firm. "Restraining order violation," he said, bagging the note as evidence. "We'll attach this to the charges." His words steadied me, but my hands trembled after he left. Derek was unraveling. I knew it. The pressure was closing in, and desperate men made reckless moves. The next morning, Marco noticed the exhaustion etched across my face as I wrapped my hands for training. "What happened?" he asked. I told him about the note. His jaw tightened, muscles flexing under his hoodie. "He's pushing, testing how far you'll bend." "Don't bend, Crissy. Not now." "I won't," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Training that day felt different. Every punch against the bag landed with Derek's name. Every slam of my fist echoed with months of swallowed screams. Sweat poured down my temples, but I didn't stop. Not until my arms ached and my lungs begged for mercy. When I finally dropped onto the mat, Marco crouched beside me. "You're building more than strength," he said. "You're building the calm for when he breaks. The calm before the storm." That was exactly what it felt like. By midweek, Ms. Patel called. "Derek's arraignment is set for Friday. We'll present the evidence formally. The DA's office is optimistic. A word I hadn't let myself feel in months. But Friday came early. On Thursday night, as I left the gym, I spotted Derek across the street. His hair was unkempt, his eyes bloodshot. He staggered toward me, shouting, "You ruined me, Crissy." His voice cracked like glass. "You think you're some kind of hero?" My body stiffened, instinct screaming danger. "Stay back," I said, loud enough for bystanders to hear. He laughed bitterly, spreading his arms. "Look at her, acting like she's better than me. You're nothing, just some meathead gym rat who..." A security guard from the corner store stepped between us. "You need to leave, buddy." Derek sneered but stumbled off, muttering curses. I exhaled slowly, legs shaking as adrenaline drained from me. I called Ms. Patel immediately. He confronted me outside the gym. "Good," she said briskly. "Every slip helps us. Document it all." Still, that night, sleep refused to come. Every creak of my apartment made my heart jump. I sat at the window, watching the city lights blur, whispering to myself, "Hold on, just one more day." Friday morning arrived sharp and cold. I walked into the courthouse in a blazer, my hair tied back, my face bare of makeup. I wanted the judge to see me as I was. Honest, unflinching. Derek sat at the defendant's table, slouched in a wrinkled hoodie. His eyes darted around the courtroom until they landed on me. He smirked, the same infuriating smirk he'd worn the night he stole from me. But this time, I didn't flinch. Ms. Patel laid out the evidence with surgical precision. The pawnshop owner testified. The elderly witness spoke clearly about Derek bragging. Officer Ramirez described the restraining order violation. And finally, the video played. Derek slurring outside my building, shouting that I was nothing. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his smirk fading. When the judge spoke, his voice carried finality. There is sufficient evidence for this case to proceed to trial. Bail is set, but the restraining order remains in full effect. Relief washed over me so strongly my knees nearly buckled. Ms. Patel touched my arm lightly. We won today. But as I stepped outside, Derek's voice carried over the crowd. This isn't over, Crissy. His words echoed, but they no longer pierced me. They bounced off the armor I had built piece by piece. That evening, I sat with Lisa in her apartment. She poured wine into 2 glasses, her eyes warm with pride. You faced him in court, she said. You didn't just survive. You fought. I stared at the deep red liquid swirling in my glass. It feels like the beginning of the end. Then make sure it ends on your terms, she replied. That night, as I walked home, the streets glistened with melted snow reflecting city lights. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel suffocating. It felt alive, charged with the promise of justice. Back inside my apartment, I spread my case file on the table one last time. Every document told a piece of the story. Betrayal, violation, defiance. Now it was ready for the closing act. Derek had reached his breaking point. But I wasn't breaking. I was rising. And the higher I climbed, the smaller he became. The reckoning was near. The morning of the trial dawned gray. Chicago's skyline veiled in mist as if the city itself was holding its breath. I dressed in silence, buttoning my blazer with steady fingers though my heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just another court date. This was the day Derek would be forced to face everything he had done. Lisa met me outside the courthouse steps, clutching a thermos of coffee. You ready? She asked, her eyes scanning me with concern. As ready as I'll ever be, I said, forcing a small smile. Inside, the courtroom hummed with low voices. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators, reporters scribbled in notepads, and somewhere in the back I saw Marco standing tall with his arms crossed. His presence grounded me. Derek shuffled in wearing a wrinkled shirt and slacks, escorted by his lawyer. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the arrogance had drained out of him. His eyes flickered toward me, but this time there was no smirk, no taunt, just a flicker of unease. The judge entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. Ms. Patel rose, her voice calm yet firm as she addressed the room. Your Honor, today we present the culmination of months of evidence against Derek Hensley. Burglary, harassment, and violation of a restraining order. Her words carried the weight of my sleepless nights, the anxiety that had gnawed at me. She laid out the evidence piece by piece, the pawnshop receipt, the witness statements, the video recordings. Each one tightened the noose around Derek's lies. When the pawnshop owner took the stand, he pointed directly at Derek. That's the guy. Sold me the laptop, the watch, and the necklace. Said he needed quick cash. Derek's lawyer tried to discredit him. Are you certain it was my client? The man leaned forward. I don't forget faces, especially ones who brag about ripping off their roommate. The courtroom stirred, and I felt heat rush to my cheeks. It was humiliating, hearing it spoken aloud, but also vindicating. Next came Officer Ramirez. He held up the sticky note Derek had left in my apartment. You can't win. That's intimidation, plain and simple, he said. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His lawyer whispered furiously to him, but Derek's gaze was fixed on the floor. Then it was my turn. The bailiff swore me in, and I walked to the stand, my heels echoing against the wood. My throat felt dry, but Lisa's encouraging smile steadied me. Ms. Anderson, Ms. Patel began gently, can you tell the court how this ordeal began? I swallowed hard, then spoke. It started with trust. Derek was my roommate. I thought he was a friend. But he stole from me, my laptop, my grandmother's necklace, things I worked hard for. When I confronted him, he laughed. And when I tried to move on, he harassed me. Notes, break-ins, threats. I looked straight at Derek. His jaw was tight. His hands clenched, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Did you feel safe in your own home during this time?" Ms. Patel asked. "No," I said firmly. I felt hunted. Every knock at the door, every creak in the night. I thought it was him. I stopped sleeping. I stopped living. And I refused to let him do that to me anymore. The judge nodded gravely. Derek's lawyer rose, attempting to rattle me with sharp questions. "Ms. Anderson, isn't it true you left your apartment unlocked on multiple occasions?" "No," I replied steadily. "I've been meticulous since the first incident." "Isn't it possible someone else left that note?" I leaned forward. The handwriting matched Derek's, and the officer testified to that. It wasn't someone else. It was him. The lawyer faltered, sensing he was losing ground. By the time I stepped down from the stand, my heart hammered like I'd run a marathon. But I felt lighter. I had spoken my truth. The defense tried to salvage Derek's case. Derek himself even testified, spinning stories about financial hardship, about me supposedly setting him up. But his words rang hollow, contradicted by every shred of evidence. At last, the judge called for closing statements. Ms. Patel stood tall, her voice clear. "This case is about accountability. It's about a man who thought he could exploit someone who trusted him and walk away without consequence. The evidence is overwhelming. We ask that justice be served." Derek's lawyer tried one last desperate plea, but even he sounded unconvinced. When the judge finally spoke, the courtroom fell silent. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds the defendant, Derek Hensley, guilty of burglary, harassment, and violation of a restraining order. The gavel struck wood, final and sharp. My breath caught in my throat. It was done. Derek's head snapped up, eyes wide in disbelief. "No, she twisted everything," he shouted, lunging to his feet. Bailiffs restrained him, their voices firm. "Sit down!" I sat frozen, my chest tight. Watching him thrash wasn't satisfying the way I thought it would be. It wasn't triumph, it was release, like a wound finally closing after months of bleeding. Outside, reporters crowded the steps, shoving microphones forward. "Ms. Anderson, how do you feel about the verdict?" I lifted my chin, relieved, safe, ready to live my life again. Marco pushed through the crowd, offering me a protective arm. Lisa followed close behind, shielding me from flashing cameras. That evening, back at my apartment, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city glowed outside, alive and restless. But for the first time in months, I felt calm. Lisa called to check in. "It's over," she said. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's finally over." But deep inside, I knew it wasn't just over. It was the reckoning. Derek had been stripped of his lies, his arrogance, his hold over me. And I had stood through the storm, unbroken. As I set my tea aside, I allowed myself to imagine the next chapter of my life, one not written by fear or betrayal, but by choice, by strength, by me, and for the first time, the future didn't scare me. It thrilled me. The day after the trial, I woke up to silence. Not the heavy silence of fear, but the kind that felt like freedom. For the first time in months, my dreams hadn't been haunted by footsteps outside my door or sticky notes with cruel words. Instead, I dreamt of open fields, of running without looking over my shoulder. I padded into the kitchen, the morning light spilling across the counter. My phone buzzed with notifications, messages from co-workers, gym members, even old friends who had followed the case. "Proud of you. You're so strong. Justice served." Each message reminded me that I hadn't fought this battle alone. When Marco knocked, I didn't flinch. I opened the door to find him holding a bag of bagels and 2 cups of coffee. "Breakfast for the champion," he said, grinning. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. "Come in." We sat at the table, the air light for once. He studied me, his expression softening. "You look different. Different how?" I asked, taking a sip of coffee. "Like someone who just dropped a 100-pound weight off her shoulders." He wasn't wrong. I felt lighter, stronger, steadier. Later that afternoon, Lisa came by. She plopped onto my couch and sighed dramatically. "So, what's next for Chicago's bravest gym coach?" I smirked. "Maybe just being a gym coach, without side quests involving stolen laptops and court battles." But Lisa shook her head. "No, Chris. You've shown everyone, including yourself, that you don't back down. You can do anything. Open your own gym. Write about what you've been through. Use your voice." Her words planted a seed I hadn't considered. For months, my life had been survival, defense, fighting to prove the truth. But now, maybe it was time to build something new. Still, healing wasn't instant. That night, I walked past my front door and double-checked the lock, an old habit etched deep into my bones. My heart raced when a car slowed outside, headlights lingering too long. But then it drove on, and I forced myself to breathe. I started therapy the following week. Sitting in the small office with framed quotes on the wall, I admitted aloud the things I had bottled up. I hated him. I hated what he turned me into. Someone scared of her own shadow. The therapist nodded. "And now?" "Now I don't hate him," I said slowly. "I don't forgive him either, not yet. But I'm done letting him take space in my head. He doesn't get to live there rent-free anymore." She smiled. "That's a powerful shift." Word of Derek's sentencing spread quickly. He received time in jail and mandatory counseling. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was accountability, and that was enough. At the gym, members welcomed me back with warmth. "We missed you, Coach Chris," one teenager said, grinning. I smiled. I missed me too. I threw myself into training sessions, into building others' confidence as much as my own. Every squat, every rep, every punch at the heavy bag felt like reclaiming something Derek had tried to take from me. Weeks turned into months. I started a small community class for women. Self-defense basics mixed with strength training. The turnout shocked me. Women of all ages showed up, some shy, some fierce, but all eager to learn. After class, a mother hugged me and whispered, "Thank you. My daughter's been scared since a man followed her home. Tonight she told me she feels strong again." That's when I realized Lisa had been right. My pain had shaped me, but it didn't define me. Sharing my story, using my skills, it was how I would move forward. One Saturday evening, Marco and I walked along Lake Michigan, the sun dipping low and painting the water gold. "Do you ever regret letting him in?" he asked quietly. I thought about it. The lies, the theft, the nights I cried myself to sleep. Then I thought about the trial, the support I'd discovered, the strength I'd found in myself. "No," I said finally. "If Derek hadn't betrayed me, I might never have known what I was capable of surviving. He took things from me, yes, but he also gave me clarity about who I am, and who I'll never be again." Marco squeezed my hand, and we walked on in silence, the waves crashing steady against the shore. The true test came months later, when I received a letter. The return address was Derek's prison. My chest tightened as I opened it. "Crissy," it began. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I was wrong. I blamed you for my failures, and I hurt you because it was easier than facing myself. I'm sorry." I read it twice, my emotions tangled. The apology didn't erase the past, but it was proof that the reckoning had reached him too. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. Not to forget, but to remind myself how far I'd come. That evening, I ended my women's class with words that came straight from my heart. Strength isn't about how much you can lift. It's about refusing to let someone else define your worth. It's about standing up when they expect you to stay down. The women nodded, their eyes shining. In their faces, I saw reflections of myself, frightened once, but fierce now. As I locked up the gym, Lisa texted, "Proud of you." "Dinner tomorrow?" I smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. Walking home, the city lights shimmered across the Chicago skyline. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't look over my shoulder. The past had tested me, broken me, and rebuilt me. But I had emerged stronger, sharper, untouchable in ways Derek would never understand. And as I stood at my window, gazing at the city below, I whispered to myself, "This is my life, my story, and I own it now." Before I turned in for the night, I picked up my journal and wrote one final thought. Justice wasn't just the verdict. Justice was choosing myself. Every single day. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because the truth is, sometimes betrayal isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of becoming exactly who you were always meant to be.